So we move our work today inside.
Okay, we're gonna work on the squirter project. What else? I mean, everybody wants to know what's a squirter project. And you're gonna learn that in this episode. This will be the best squirter project episode you ever seen on YouTube, I promise. These are all the components of my squirter test rig, which I built. And that's what we're gonna use in this episode, okay? And then we put it together and then I show you guys how this works.
I feel like I'm gonna get drenched in oil.
That is very likely, yes. Okay?
I'm wearing my good stuff.
Okay.
Look at all that stuff. He machined that on those Saturday mornings.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Voila.
Really? The most important thing is actually the girl here.
This is our 3-liter SDV6 out of a Land Rover Discovery 4. And this is going to be Exhibit A to test the functionality of the squirters. The squirters are also called piston cooling jets. They come in various shapes. Usually they have like one cooling nozzle, sometimes they have two. And what they do is basically spray oil on the underside of the piston to cool it and also to lubricate it. And these squirters are typically damaged during engine disassembly and they do not receive a lot of attention by the mechanics. For example, this piston cooling jet clearly got a dent right here, and this dent can cause a severe engine failure. And in this episode, I want to explain you why this can cause huge engine problems, and I also want to reveal what other functions are hidden in these squirters. These are much more complex than you may think. And for that, we're gonna install my squirter test setup onto this engine block.
Oh my God. But the most important question is, Christian, which O-ring did you install here? Just in case anybody watched our last video.
Well, this is still the OEM O-ring, and that's not part of this episode, okay? Because it's already late in the evening, and in about an hour, it's gonna be past Vera's bedtime,
yes.
And we're gonna get a lot of on-camera gawning, okay? So we better hurry up and get this project done. On any given engine block, you have several openings where oil is gonna squirt out and gonna go on your floor. So in the first step, we're gonna have to close all those openings in the engine block. I started already by doing that. This is the turbocharger oil supply line. I plugged it off here and I plugged it off over here. There's also an oil supply line to each cylinder head. On the TDV6, this is actually here, and on the other side over here, okay? On this bank, this engine actually has an oil pressure switch. So we're gonna hook up an oil pressure gauge on this side. I made basically this little assembly here on a Saturday where I had absolutely nothing else to do.
What? M10?
That's an 8-inch ISO G thread. See, I got this cube made up.
German precision. Oh boy.
So, cutting a cylinder head screw.
Christian, you have to round that screw now. It's all edgy.
I put it like this in the engine block.
Oh my God. And that's what's ruining your clothes, you know? But I'm glad, because I don't like that shirt.
It would be much worse if it's ruining the engine block.
Okay. Yes?
And we need an 8-inch plug here.
Oh my God. I did not know we have plugs.
This is the one we need.
Okay, and everybody, of course, has stuff like that at home.
Everybody has a box like this.
Yes.
That's like completely normal equipment. You need a little bit of Festo, a little bit of SMC, a little bit of Norgren. And of course you have ISO G and NPT thread. So, put that back in here. There. My plug basically got this cross drilled over here.
It definitely looks like a science project. And Christian's going to duplicate that for the other side.
Exactly. Okay, I got 2 blocks done. You see I installed here an O-ring and here a connection for our oil pressure gauge. So all I have to do is install this here. This is Vera's tool. I always have to ask for permission, okay? Right here.
That doesn't look tight.
It is tight. There's an
Okay.
O-ring inside. It
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
need much power.
I get a lot of questions where you can see the oil pressure on the Discovery 4 and you just can't. You have to use something like that.
Yeah, because Ford was too cheap to put in a real oil pressure sensor. This would solve a lot of problems, but car doesn't have it, okay?
Yeah.
It only has a cheap ass switch, which tells you it's too late. Now you can see I can connect here our oil pressure gauge. On the other side, we're gonna install a bypass valve, and we're gonna use that valve to regulate the oil pressure later on in the engine block to simulate different pressures. That is easier than simulating the RPM, okay? Because I got only limited ability to do that. Same thing, I machined in here an O-ring, and this O-ring seals up this hole, and it also diverts the oil out through my oil pressure regulator valve here. And hopefully it's not gonna leak big time. This, and done. Now in the next step, we're gonna have to supply this engine with oil, and for that we're gonna actually use an oil pump here, but we're not gonna attach it to the crankshaft. If we attach it to the crankshaft, we would actually have to rotate the entire engine to get oil pressure. We don't want that. We want the oil pressure while the engine block is stationary so that we can do closer monitoring. Because once this starts rotating, you don't see anything anymore.
I hope he knows what he's doing because...
Yeah, I'm not so sure. You know what? We're gonna set up an additional light.
Yes,
This
it's
is
quite
dark.
dark.
So this is my mounting for the oil pump. And you can see I installed like a little spindle bearing, and that simulates basically this crankshaft output, but not exactly at the same spot. We just gotta mount this a little bit below the engine, okay?
Okay.
And we'll put this right here. I'm wearing my Built Kinda Tough shirt, okay? Which is matching this project. There, see, it's on. And I think I screwed up. Yeah, I screwed
Oh
up.
no.
Okay, we can't mount that yet. I first have to put my plug here on the back.
Okay.
See, this is my oil pickup tube because we're not directing the oil directly into the engine block right here. We're directing it into this bracket. And of course I have to attach this bracket. We used this one before on our giant oil pump test, remember?
Yes, I remember. We had an oil spill or two.
Or three. It's brand
Yeah.
new oil.
It already looks... Oh no.
So this goes on here. You can see what this is doing. It's basically taking the oil out of the oil pump and shooting it out this fitting, okay?
But how does the oil get into the oil pump and then to the squirters?
Okay, maybe we should install also the oil pump suction tube here now.
Okay.
This is usually that pipe what is inside your sump.
The tiny one.
Yeah, well, it's
The
not
thin.
tiny.
Yeah, but it's thin.
Yeah, so...
And like 20 centimeters.
Well,
Which is tiny.
I don't know what you talk like this. I plug it in. And now for the third time, we put the oil pump on here. There, okay? I think we're gonna clean that several more times. What I'm doing now is I'm bolting down the oil pump as if it would be in the engine block, okay? So I prepared this. We also used this before in our giant oil pump test video. Okay, so this is mounted now. Now the next step is to get the oil from here into the engine block.
Oh boy.
Also with an O-ring seal, so there was quite a bit of machining. And this fits onto here, like this. This is the oil inlet, and all we got to do now is hook this up to here. And yes, I know the hose is almost kinking, okay? No need for desktop mechanics to comment now. It's just a test setup. Oh, his hose is all kinking. We just got to hold about like between 0.5 and 4 bar. That's it.
4 bar.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There are a few more little details. For example, we need an oil return hose from our bypass valve. So that's this one here. We plug this on here. Yeah.
It's a bit small. Oh my God. It's gonna pop off. Okay, this is attempt number 364 to finally make our squirter video.
Okay, it's not that bad, okay? There was just a small interruption. Now, I did mount here an oil tray, okay? And I already cleaned it up. And you can see it's an incline because this is a very crucial function of my test rig. Because when I put the engine now in this angle here, I got this all perfectly dialed in. I can secure here the oil intake hose.
Oh my God, that's gonna be a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I think so too, okay? But that's what people want to see on YouTube.
Yes.
We also have to mount this hose here. And we also have to mount this hose. This is just different hoses, so it doesn't give a complete mess, just a little mess.
Yes.
Which
Yeah,
we
these
can
are
put
most
on.
useful.
This is ready to take in the oil, but we still need something to drive this pump.
Yeah.
Let me bolt this down here real quick. Okay, good.
Good.
Now we can mount a drive motor, and I thought of using my drill here.
Have you dry cycled that system already?
I had it once together, but then I ran out of time and I thought, okay, let's just disassemble it and put it together on camera. So
Oh
it's
my
not
God.
as much work. And we can mount
That
this.
looks like genius.
Okay. You just saved yourself.
Yeah. We don't only have Makita and Milwaukee, we also have Metabo tools. It was my father's, but the thing is, if you borrow something to me, you may never ever get it back. And we are still in March, you know, today is like March 15th. And it's still freaking cold.
And we're so focused on the job here, you know.
Yes.
Stupid thing. Oh,
What?
wrong
It's going in the wrong direction.
That's better. Now we need oil. I'm using 0W20.
5W20.
Okay, almost the same. Because I'm simulating warm oil, okay?
Oh my God, what are you doing? You're gonna put it in here?
So this oil has about the viscosity as the 5W30 or 5W40 when it's hot. And I have it left over from my Challenger, and before it ever goes to waste, we put it in here. I also got a new oil filter installed up there in the oil cooler, okay?
Yes, okay, good.
Of course, but whatever dirt we get in will go through this oil pump here. But it's not the oil pump from this engine, okay? So
No, it's from Rainer's Discovery 4. It was a 2011 or 2012.
So we shouldn't do any harm to this engine at all.
Oh, it's overflowing almost.
I turned the engine on its side so we can look inside here and actually see the squirters, okay? And the unique setup is now that we don't have to run the crankshaft to get oil pressure. We're gonna cycle the oil here through the channels where it normally cycles through in the engine blocks, or even going through the oil cooler and the filter. And then we have this valve here where I can adjust the oil pressure over here. So if I run this now, it should suck the oil up just like in your engine. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Let me put it into continuous
I
run
think
mode.
we need...
There we go.
Oh my God.
And here's the oil pressure. That's the lowest I can go. You can see how the oil is running through all the bearings of the crankshaft. Are you amazed by my test rig yet? Oh, what's falling apart? Let's do an emergency stop. It's extremely noisy. I wish that drill would be quieter, okay? Because it's only the drill you hear. What we're gonna check out now is basically the spray pattern of the squirters up here, okay? We wanna see if they deliver their pressure, and we got the one here in the middle, And over here, this one, I'm gonna have to turn the crankshaft then down. And same thing here, I have to turn the crankshaft down so that we can see it. And we wanna see an even spray pattern. We also wanna see if those squirters basically turn on and off, okay? I'm gonna show you how I do that. Okay, trying to improve our drive system. I wish it wouldn't be as noisy so you can hear us talk better. Here. You can see it's flooding this bearing here in the front of the crankshaft. It's flooding the bearing of the pump. When I close this up now, here. There it is. Here you see the spray pattern of the piston cooling jet. See, this one is nice. See how you can see this one? Very nice. That's the spray pattern. This is a beautiful one. I've seen this before when the engine was rotating on what's called the sim tester. At least that's what Dave calls it, okay? But my sim tester can actually circle the oil now without the crankshaft rotating, and I can see much cleaner where the oil is coming out of each main bearing. And I could also verify each of the 6 squirter jets, that they have a nice even flow and that they hit the correct spot inside the piston. That's what I was interested in. And I can also see that the connecting rods get only with oil supplied when the oil hole of the corresponding main lines up with the upper bearing shell. That's where the bearing shell has that groove, okay? So only throughout half of the rotation per main, the connecting rods get actually supplied with oil. But it certainly gets oil.
Well, at least what we also did with that is we cleaned that engine. Look how nasty the oil is.
Wow, look at that. This was,
yeah, but these are air bubbles.
Make sure we get oil here in the back, and then I want to rotate slowly through the different modes on each conrod, and we want to make sure each conrod is flooded with oil. I have to put my earmuffs back on because I'm right next to the drill here.
Yes.
Okay, you also.
No, but then he talks to me and I don't understand the word.
Camera. You know, she isn't doing anything and she's completely oily already.
Yes. Start your engine.
Yeah, you can see it clearly. Good. This one. Here, I want to explain again how that oil supply to the connecting rods from the main bearings work. Here you can see the first main bearing, and that first main bearing has one oil hole and it puts oil into this first conrod bearing, okay? That's all it lubricates. This main lubricates only this bearing. And because there is a groove in the bearing shell, it will only get oil to this conrod main through half of a rotation of the crankshaft, versus the other half, the oil supply to the conrod is shut off. So you have like sort of a pulsating oil supply. Versus when you go to the second main bearing, which is this one, you can see this one actually supplies 2 conrod bearings. With the first half of the revolution, it supplies oil to this conrod bearing, and with the second half of its revolution, it supplies oil to this conrod bearing. What that means is through the entire revolution of this bearing, it needs to deliver oil to the conrod bearings, versus the first bearing only has to deliver through half of a revolution oil to a conrod bearing. Now overall that means you have less oil remaining, or oil pressure left over for the second and third main, because they have to supply twice the amount of conrods, okay? That oil is gonna reduce the pressure on main 2 and main 3. And when you look at the typical bearing failures of these engines, you always find main 2 and main 3 are the ones staffed for oil. And also the connecting rods are usually at risk. And look at our patient here. It burned up one of the inner connecting rods. It very seldomly burns up the outer connecting rods, okay?
Yeah.
This is a clear evidence that the oil supply from main 2 and main 3 is insufficient in comparison to main 1 and main 4. We can see in our test setup here that there is always oil delivered to the inner conrods versus there is only oil delivered to the 2 outer conrods through half of a revolution. The rest of that revolution, the oil is fully available for the main bearing. I find that really interesting, and that is almost on all V6 engines like this. Every short-built V6 has that issue, okay? Some manufacturers just have more control over that. Ford built this thing just a little bit too small. If there would be more bearing surface, like I want to say 25% more on each conrod, this engine would have lasted forever. And it would have blown any Toyota engine right out of the water, because it is more powerful and more economic than a Toyota in an equivalent size, okay? It just snaps a conrod and burns a bearing here and there. It's not that big of a deal, okay? It's built kind of tough. Another thing we want to investigate still is how this check valve inside the piston cooling jets is functioning. Okay, but this one runs really slow. We can get the idle RPM.
Yeah, it's 0.5.
And the problem is you're gonna have to do that here while I'm looking inside, okay? So give it a slow RPM. Right here, you wanna be around 1 bar, okay?
I am, right?
Yeah, that's good enough. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna check if the squirters are already on. Okay, it's off. Now increase slowly and read the pressure to me.
It's 0.5. So 0.5, 6, 7, 8, 1 bar.
Oh, it kicks in at 1?
1.1, 1.2.
I see it 1.1, it already has full flow. The one in the front kicked in at 1.2. This one started to dribble at 1 and kicked in at 1.1. So there is a little bit...
Maybe my observation is not exact, but...
Oh, I think your observation is dead accurate. How else could it be, okay? You're doing an excellent job. Now we checked the last one also.
Okay.
It's amazing that they don't deliver squirter action below 1 bar.
So I'm going to floor it from now on.
Okay, and go.
Okay, so 0.5, 0.5, 6, 7, 0.9, 1 bar, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3.
1.3, it starts. Now it's there. Now it's there. What is it?
1.2.
Okay. The 2 squirters in the back, okay, they kicked in at 1.3. The lowest one we had kicking in at 1.1, and we also had one kicking in at 1.2. And they were not in chronological order, okay? So you can't say one gets oil pressure first and the other one gets oil pressure second. Oil pressure in the gallery is the same at all positions, okay? So I think it's the tolerance of the squirters themselves. So this one needed 1.3 bar, clearly.
Maybe 1.2.
Well, maybe, but definitely not 1.1. It also kicked in kind of weak, and then it dribbled, and then it went all on at full flow. So I learned now a lot. Basically, I know now what this check valve does in those. Before that was speculation. And now I know when we go around idling with low oil pressure forever, the pistons do not receive any squirting oil.
Yeah, but now, Christian, we have to take it all apart.
Why?
Because the slow squirter is the one with a failed piston. So maybe it is broken.
No, we did mix them up. Well, remember, it's true this engine had a melted piston, but I don't think it was caused by the squirter itself. I think it was caused by the squirter getting blocked because of pure maintenance lag. Blew those squirters free, and they now all deliver oil.
Okay.
I don't think it's a problem that there is a little bit of a tolerance in between them.
Oh, okay.
But I know that your Discovery doesn't have that check valve in it. Your Discovery engine delivers oil at all times.
So I don't have to floor it. Good.
You don't have to floor it. This looks to me is something in the Gen 1, Gen 2 engine and not in the 2.7 liters. I'm pretty sure I could blow through your squirters when we had them originally out. I don't exactly remember. You guys let me know in the comment if the 2.7 liters squirters, if you have them out right now, have a check valve in them, or if you can blow through them. I know you can't blow through these, and I'm pretty sure this is something they changed in order to make those engines more and more fuel efficient. You can see how much energy that little electric drill has to deliver just to get that oil going, okay? That's not nothing. You're talking like whatever, 200, 300 watts, and with my drilling machine at 2 bar, it's then 500 or 600 watts. So you have to deliver just that much to make that engine get lubrication. That's a lot of energy, and you can see if they improve this a little bit to consume less energy or use 5W dumbass oil, make that oil thinner, it saves immediately fuel, and then they reach their specifications, which they're supposed to reach, okay? This is another takeaway for me, how much energy you have to put into such an oil pump to make it deliver that amount of oil. I also did not know that it's that much, and we're not even looking at the cylinder heads right now.
No.
Okay?
Yeah.
So this is amazing. I want to say this completes this test.
I want to say something.
Oh, okay, good.
So because actually the 2.7 liter doesn't fail anymore because everybody already changed the oil pump. Right now the 2.7 liter doesn't fail anymore. I mean, it's 20 years old and everybody changed the big oil pump, and there's no reason for a TDV6 to fail anymore. But we only deal with Gen 2 engines. So you guys with a failed Gen 1 engine, you check your squirters and tell us.
We would like to know if a Gen 1, so out of a 2011 Discovery 4 3-liter, has a check valve, and we would like to know if the 2.7-liter has a check valve. And I bet the 2.7-liter doesn't. So you're absolutely right. And yes, the 2.7-liters which are still around, they don't fail anymore.
They don't fail anymore.
Yeah, and if they fail now, they go to Toyota heaven.
Yes. That hose is made in India. I don't think I've ever had something in my hand made in India.
And at the same time, we checked the oil delivery of the entire engine. So I'm quite happy with this.
And we cleaned the engine. The engine is now so clean.
Yeah, it's completely flushed. All that dirt is now out. So we're gonna disassemble our test rig a little bit and we can end this video, right?
Yes. So let me tell you why we still have, after so many years, so much Challenger oil left over. Because here, that is his Challenger book, you know, the Haynes manual. Everybody has that. And look at that. Here it says 5.7 liter V8, 14.5 to 14.7 quarts. But it's for the cooling system. The engine oil is right underneath and it's only 6 quarts. So that man ordered 15 liters of oil for the Challenger.
But I didn't fill it into the coolant system, okay? Yes. So I wasn't that stupid. Okay, so I'm still very happy with our test here. That was really enlightening to the 3-liter community, except for those desktop mechanics who right now, I could have told you that, I worked at Ford, I know everything about squirters, I'm a hobby squirter. We do appreciate desktop mechanic comments because most of the time some of that proves to be right, except those who say when I use an extension and a torque wrench, you're losing all that torque through your extension. But
I'm not going to touch anything because I'm dirty and oily enough.
It's so dirty. Oh no.
He dropped it in the oil.
Yeah, somebody wants to borrow my rig. Let me know, okay? I can send you all the parts and you can do your own squirter video. Yeah, but it worked, okay?
Yes.
We are now the master of the squirters. That's my oil connector here. Yeah. I should rent out this test rig. It's gonna rinse out forever. Okay. So.
Good thing we have those Milwaukee tools, I have to think. Are you getting weak?
No, just careful.
Oh, yeah, the oil pressure switch.
And it didn't drop the oil ring in.
So if Christian is on the whiteboard, that means you're about to get a lecture.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to lecture this entire topic again. Now, the reason the Prince Charming engine failed was pure lack of maintenance. And that's why we installed now an engine block from a Jaguar XJ or XF. The piston of the Prince Charming engine looked like this, okay? It looked a little bit melted. And I think the root cause was a clogged squirter, because when I took the squirters out originally and I blew them through with an air nozzle, not knowing so much about piston squirters, one of them was completely clogged until I sprayed a lot of air into it, and then it just blew out everywhere into the room. Wasn't really nice. Unfortunately, I don't have that on video.
I was not here.
Yeah. And that's the reason why I wanted to know now more about squirters and why I made this little science project here.
Yes, and it is a science project. And now I'm more stressed than ever.
Okay, the spaghetti have to wait. We got to finish this up first. We have two different piston cooling jets. This one here from a Discovery 4 without an O-ring. This one here from a Jaguar XJ with an O-ring. And I'm not sure if those cooling jets are internally different. So I built like a little test setup here to verify their functionality and to also compare it with the cooling jets in our engine block, which we tested with hydraulic pressure. So we're just going to do this now here with air pressure and see if we find a difference in between those cooling jets. We'll start with the Discovery 4 cooling jet. This one is pretty much undamaged except for a dent here. This is why I didn't use it. So I hook it up to my test setup right here. And you can see I got a pressure regulator here and the cooling jet here. If I increase the pressure slowly now, you hear it release. You can see the release pressure is above 1 bar, but below 1.3 bar. Somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2. Let's test the second one, because I'm sure there is some sort of a tolerance in between them. Release pressure is a little higher. This one releases more like at 1.2 bar. You can hear this valve moving back and forth. So internally, this looks like that, okay? There is basically the oil inlet, and then there is a little piston, and that piston is spring-loaded. So once the pressure here builds up and it overcomes that spring, that piston will basically jump back and let the oil flow out here. When you lower the pressure, the spring will push it back down. The entire thing has a little bit of a shift hysteresis based on that spring. And that's exactly what we see here in both cases of the Discovery 4 squirters. And the release pressure matches what we got in our engine, okay? One was a little bit above 1.2 bar, but that's really close. And I think we can leave it like this. There is nothing wrong with that injector, because Vera was concerned in the video. The cooling jets of the Jaguar, I thought they are different. I mean, they have an O-ring, but maybe that's just an earlier or a later version, okay? We all know if Ford can save an O-ring, they will. If Ford needs to add an O-ring because the engine fails, they will. So we never know why this O-ring is there or not. Maybe somebody in the comments can let us know. Now, if we hook up one of those squirters from the Jaguar engine and we do the same test, we get more like a steady increase of flow. Okay? So this piston cooling jet is already open. Let's try another one.
So you mean we could have saved that oily mess?
No.
No?
I wanted to see the spray pattern and how it works under oil. And there's always a reason to make an oily mess. So this little setup under no circumstances would have replaced my scientific test here I worked on for 2 weeks, okay? This one also increases the pressure slowly. And it doesn't have a clear determined shift point. It doesn't have a clear determined shift point. Now we got one more. Let's do this one as well.
Yeah, but same here.
Same here, okay? The release pressure there is more like 0.2, 1.2 bar. I do not see a clear release pressure point where the valve opens. I think these squirters may suffer from squirter leakage, so they have a damaged valve on the inside, or they are of a different design.
What was the failure of that engine? A crank snap?
Yeah, it had a crank snap. That's our engine block here, and that's why we had the line board.
Yeah.
Okay, and there is a good reason why Ford would actually design a Discovery 4 squirter different from a Jaguar XF. Because if you think about the use case of the engine, there is one major difference. The Discovery 4 will require torque in idle condition, versus a Jaguar basically does not. It's not used for rock crawling. So the Discovery 4 engine requires a decent amount of oil pressure in idle to protect the crankshaft because there's torque required. And I think that's why they installed this release pressure. They want to make sure they are not wasting any oil pressure through the squirters in idle, versus on the Jaguar, they got a different use case. That car uses less torque in idle. It's usually only driven in normal traffic and with 250 on the Autobahn. If you think about if they drive on the Autobahn and the pistons have the full temperature and the squirters are running at maximum pressure, cooling those pistons down, and now the driver goes into a gas station, stops the vehicle and lets it idle. They want to be able to cool down those pistons from that high performance down to a normal temperature in a relatively efficient time. And they also don't care so much about the oil pressure on the crankshaft because the car is not using any torque and it's only idling. It's the same if you drive in regular city traffic. You basically just roll around, you hit your gas a little bit, it's not utilizing any torque, compared to an SUV, which is heavier and has a small gear and it's going steep uphill and it's rock crawling, okay? I think that is the reason why they designed these squirters differently, and that is the reason why these have squirter leakage. But I could be wrong. I don't work for Ford, and now we need to go upstairs and eat.
Yeah, but I thought when he stops after his 250 kilometer per hour trip from Basel up to Frankfurt, that the squirters are not supposed to cool because the pistons are not supposed to cool down so quickly.
What you refer to is called thermal stress, and you are right. There is a problem if pistons get cooled down by the squirters too quickly. That puts stress on the piston. And that is the case if you have squirters which squirt too much oil in idle. And that is why they are not permanently open. That's why they do regulate down their squirting action towards idle. We saw that. They did not completely shut off. There is still a valve inside. They have some leakage, but at one point they will only dribble. And that is to avoid thermal stress in the engine. Very good point. If they would deliver always a full squirt and you would come and stop your car after a fast Autobahn stretch when everything has full temperature and you're supposed to let it idle when you've done that, then these would cool down with the, let's say, 110 degree oil, the pistons too quickly. And in order to minimize that effect, but still cool the piston down slowly, they regulate the cooling stream down over these squirters. Again, this is just my theory from my research I did in the internet. In order to avoid thermal stress, they basically regulate the piston cooling jets down towards idle so that they do not full blast. And the second reason is they need to preserve the oil pressure for the main bearings. So both types of squirters do that in a sense, but differently. And that is why I say if you take the squirters from a Jaguar engine and you put it into a Discovery 4 application, you're changing the characteristics of the piston cooling jets. And I think you should avoid that because we are not smarter than the Ford engineers. Except when it's about balancing.
We know everything better than the Ford engineers.
When it comes to balancing, I'm sorry dudes, I know it best, okay? I forgot more about balancing than other people will ever know.
I drive a lot on the Autobahn. I spent this week alone 500 kilometers on the Autobahn. And I never ever, unless I get fuel, I never ever shut my engine off. If we have to take a restroom break, I let the engine run because it only takes a minute or so.
When I lived in the United States and I had my first Firebird 350, I had one base rule, and that was, if I'm sitting in the car, the engine is running. That was 25 years ago. Today we think a little bit different about this.
That was 30 years ago.
Okay. And today we think a little bit different about this, but back then that was my rule.
So my spaghettis are mush now. So Christian, explain what you are doing.
I'm
Because
ordering
he's
my parts.
just not getting rid of our queen.
The queen is broken, so we have to fix it. We can't sell it broken. So it got the 8 EP70, that's this one here. And then it got this cooler.
So just as important as knowing how to fix your car is knowing where to get the parts.
Yeah.
And that takes most of the time actually.
Here are the O-rings for the transmission cooler lines. Okay, they sell them individually. There's the number. I got this already on my list. And it's €3.30 for an O-ring. That is okay.
So I get asked a lot, especially in the last week, where do we get our OEM parts? We get it from a Land Rover online store. They have the spare parts drawings, you can find the part numbers, and you either buy directly at Land Rover or search for the part number.
If I want to buy now this entire line with everything, I click on it, it jumps down here, then I go like, oh shit, I can't afford that. Then I click on this number, it jumps back up, and then I just get the O-rings, $3.30, yeah, that's good enough. On this repair, the trigger wheel, of course, is expensive. It's $160.
But it's cheaper than on a Land Rover Discovery 4. You know, when we find a problem, Christian makes a list.
There.
You know?
And then
we go into our own parts store, you know, stuff we have at home.
And what did we have on stock?
And we already have a bunch of stuff on stock.
See, anybody should have that chain from the transfer case at home on stock.
Yeah.
This is just minor stuff you need.
The fix cost €189, but we need a second transmission stand because the transmission has to come out, and that's heavy. It's too heavy for me.
So I'm Herr Christian Moose.
So how much money did you spend?
€462 to fix the rear crankshaft seal of a Land Rover Range Rover L405 with the 4.4 liter V8. And that includes a new transmission stand as Vera wanted, okay?
Yes.
If I deduct that, it would be €320.
The car is still for sale.
Yes, we're gonna sell it right afterwards, but we can't sell it. At least I can't sell it with a leaking rear crankshaft seal. That's just not possible, okay?
Yeah, well, that's not the case. Christian just really wants to fix the queen. That is what I meant.
Okay, that's it for our squirter video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. We certainly did. And at this point, I want to thank our Patreons a lot for their support, and
We'll see you next Sunday with a transmission out job on our L405 Queen.
for a minor repair we had to do in order to sell the Queen, okay? We can't sell it if it's limping a little bit. That's not possible. But we got it out.
We did.